Oh, it's been a while since we've done one of these, a Red, Gold, and Bold podcast coming to you live. If you're catching us via the stream, Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Central is where you can catch us on the Twitch, the Facebook, the Twitter, and the YouTube. It is a losing Red, Gold, and Bold. It's been a couple of months since this happened, but the Kansas City Chiefs falling to the Cincinnati Bengals 34-31. We will break it all down. We will talk about the Chiefs' outlook for the playoffs. Is this something that was exposed on the defensive side, something to be concerned here? With only 3 points from the offense in the second half. How much does that concern everybody? The Chiefs struggling to beat playoff teams, 1-4 against AFC playoff teams right now. Offensive line taking on water. The officials clearly having it in for the Kansas City Chiefs. If you listen to Chiefs fans, we will break it all down, beginning with whether or not this was more about the Chiefs or more about the Bengals. Here with us, as always, to break it down from the NFL Network and NFL.com, Jeff Chadiha is with us. Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHP. And guys, how about it? Jeff, let's start with you. We always like to ask the question, more about the Chiefs, more about the Bengals, and how this one finished up.
I'll go Bengals. I think when you have a quarterback throws for almost 500 yards and a wide receiver almost end up with 300 yards, and you're playing for a division championship, you fall back behind by a couple touchdowns, you make your way back into the game. I think that the Chiefs certainly had their moments where you can say that they cost themselves a win here, but it felt to me more like the Bengals had the mentality that they were going to do whatever it took to get the win. And when you're making the kind of plays Jamar Chase made in this game, when you're making the kind of throws that Joe Burrow made under duress, oftentimes, I think he was sacked 4 times in this contest, it speaks to their ability. I think going into this game, the thing that made me pick the Chiefs was just I didn't know if the Bengals were ready for this kind of a moment. The Chiefs have been in these kind of moments for the last 4 years. They've had a lot of success in these moments. And usually what you see when the Chiefs are playing against a team, like you saw a few weeks back with the Chargers, is that the opponent tends to fizzle and fade and fumble it away. And this time around, it was the Bengals who were making all the big plays. So I give it to them.
Eric, how about you? Where are you putting this one?
We talked about this on your show today. Like, the end of game stuff was inexplicable for Andy Reid. That's not the only reason they lost. They were playing a team that was playing fantastic football, a team that took advantage of the way that they bungled the last part of the game. No pun intended. But I do agree with Jeff. I think in all 3 games that the Chiefs have lost to division champions this year, all 3 times the other team was just better than the Chiefs. And that's something to acknowledge. And that's something where if you're a fan of the team, you just have to come up for water, or come up out of the water and say, look, like in the playoffs, this team's just got to be better. Right. And we always talk about 2019, in 2019, they lost to Colts. Colts were not a playoff team, but they lost to Houston, a team they eventually avenged, and Tennessee, a team they eventually avenged. And in both of those games, the other team outplayed them. And so it's not just like, even if you want this team to win the Super Bowl, you don't have to not concede that, right? There are going to be teams in the AFC, especially as they become the hunted and not the hunter. There's going to be teams in the AFC that play better than they do on any given Sunday. And it's important to acknowledge that that's possible. And it certainly happened, this past week.
Yeah. And look, this is one that I think, if we're honest about it, I know Eric and I did touch on this on the radio show today, Jeff, so I'll get your opinions about it. Does this feel like, which games? I mean, the score obviously is going to reflect of the 4 losses. It doesn't really reflect the Bills and Titans, two games where the Chiefs were soundly defeated. It reflects more the Charger and Raven losses that came right down to the end. But is this backing the Chiefs up? We've heard Eric say a couple of times about different teams. They peaked too early. The Patriots peaked too early. Is this a sign that the Chiefs peaked too early and they're reverting back to the form that they showed when they were 3-4?
I wouldn't go that far. I'm not a big fan of the peak theory. So, I mean, all due respect to Eric, I understand why it's there, because there are teams that, like the Cowboys, for example, that they're super hot earlier in the year and they begin to tail off. We've seen that from the Cardinals. But I think it's more so eventually you show who you are in this league. I think you play enough games over the certain period of time, you're going to show your strengths, you're going to show your weaknesses. Chiefs are still the most dangerous team in the AFC, but what I've said throughout the season has been that when they're playing teams like Buffalo, like Tennessee, like the Chargers, like the Bengals this week, explosive teams with talented quarterbacks and talented receivers give them problems. And I don't know if there's any evidence against that now. I think that's why this game was so interesting to me, because I wanted to see a game where you didn't have the question of, well, Chris Jones wasn't there, or Charvarius Ward wasn't there, or Willie Gay wasn't playing more, or Daniel Sorensen was playing too much. You want to see all these guys out there against a really good offense. And so what I saw was just a team that has got a lot of strengths, but they tend to, what's the right way to say this? I think they overestimate the ability of their corners. And I think that's a dangerous game to play. I think, if anything, Steve Spagnuolo learned a hard lesson about you can't be out there thinking you've got Deion Sanders and Champ Bailey playing corner for you when you've got Jamar Chase on the other side of you. You got to be a little more conservative. You got to be a little more smarter, and you can't put those guys in positions to lose games for you.
Jeff, did you see bad coverage from the Chiefs corner? No, seriously, because I know Jamar Chase had a big day, right? But like, you can play great defense on Michael Jordan. You can play great defense on Steph Curry, and they can still go for 30. There's a little bit of that happening in the NFL today with the skill level of quarterbacks, wide receivers, the technology of the gloves that make everything stick in their hands. You know, like even the 3rd and 27 play, I've watched it now like 25 times. I mean, Charvarius Ward is right there. Is he the best corner? No. And Eric and I touched on this, that you and I would probably, let's just get into it right now, right? Let's talk Charvarius Ward.
Let's get into it.
You know, it's.
I'm turning the volume so I can hear this.
Well, I mean, because I said, look, I think people will paint it that I say he's the best, or Jeff might paint it that I say he's a great corner. He's not a great corner, but I think he's a solid corner. And other people will paint it that Jeff says he sucks. And I don't think you say he sucks, right? You just don't think he's a top shelf guy. And so, like, he lacks the, upper end body control that elite wideouts have, the ability to adjust in the air. I mean, I think that's a nuance that people don't get. I mean, he's there. I mean, because I always hate it when defensive coaches say, well, we're in the right spot. Now we got to make a play on the ball. Well, you're not making a play on the ball because you can't, right? Like, you don't have that extra athleticism, that ability to not just jump, but jump and twist and then still, get your hands together and have the coordination to make a catch. That's usually why DBs play DB, right? They don't have that next level, attribute that goes with making those acrobatic catches in the air. But Charvarius Ward is right there. I mean, he's on his hip. At a time, Jamar Chase was having, I wish I could remember which game it was, but everyone saw the highlight because, first of all, they were talking about all the drops he had, and people were wanting to label this guy a bust in the preseason. Yeah. But the one where he's clearly got the DB beat, the ball hits his hands, he knocks it straight up in the air over his head to the defensive back who catches it and then turns around and is going the other way. Jamar Chase was a colossal boob on that play. On this day, he made them all. He showed the upper end. He showed the greatness. And Charvarius Ward showed that he is a solid corner. If you're going to make just perfect throws to incredibly athletic receivers, he's going to, yes, he may not be able to get his head around or get his hands on the ball, but he's right there with him. I mean, is it really bad coverage from the corners, or is it a front seven that didn't get home on an all-out blitz?
Yeah, well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think one, I don't think Charvarius Ward is trash. I mean, I think I want to clarify that. I think he's a solid corner. He fits well in what they do defensively. The point I'm making is that when he played against Devontae Adams, who could have had a game like this, by the way, if Aaron Rodgers was throwing the football. Everybody was talking about how he shut him down. And I'm like, let's pump the brakes on this now. It's a little different story when you're out there with a quarterback who trusts you, who's putting the ball in position to have you make a play on it. And I think Eric can speak to this. He was a receiver. It's different when guys can run by you. And that's what changed the game in this game for Charvarius Ward and for Rashad Fenton and L'Jarius Sneed, in that the Chiefs, technically, they want to put their hands on you. They want to push you around. They want to manhandle you. And that's great when you're only having about 3 seconds to throw the football. When you got about 5 to 7 seconds on the football, guess what? Flags start coming out. And they start coming out because guys begin to separate from you. Guys make double moves. All of a sudden, that little tug, when you're right next to a guy, becomes an extension. And refs see that. And as the game goes on, they begin to anticipate that stuff happening. And so the point I'm making is, yeah, Charvarius Ward was right there, but he couldn't make the play because he was so concerned about trying to keep up with Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And that's what changed when the speed's involved. If it's just a guy who can't run by you, then you're okay, I can turn my head, I can knock the ball down. But when it's a guy who runs by you, look at a couple of plays he made, including the 3rd and 27, it's that last little second when the ball's in the air, he separates. And he separates because he's just a better athlete than Charvarius Ward.
Yeah, the thing I think, though, where I can appreciate Spagnuolo is he is making a good gamble, right? Like those throws to the outside against the Chiefs corners are low probability events, right? Like, and it just so happens that the Bengals have a player who can make those plays. The Titans have a player who can make those plays. We saw that in the Titans game. The Bills have players that can make those plays, right? So like that's the hard part when we evaluate the Chiefs. We're thinking, okay, against most offenses, sending 8 and playing man-on-man against corners who are solid, who aren't going to make mistakes, but aren't going to wow you with talent on the ball, that is going to win 11 games a year, but there are the 5 that they lose that are a little disappointing, right? Like that's, I think, where you get the issue. But like if you look at the Chiefs defense, it's not even just our PFF grades, right? Like if you look at the passer rating allowed by corners on this team, passer rating is not a great statistic, but we all know what the scale is. DeAndre Baker, 117.5, not great. L'Jarius Sneed, 102.2. That's not great either, but he plays in the slot. It's easier to make plays in the slot. Mike Hughes, 94.5. That's basically a league average pass to the outside. And then you look at Rashad Fenton, 87.9. That's a pretty damn good passer rating against. No touchdowns against this year for Rashad Fenton. And then Charvarius Ward, a 77.6 passer rating into his coverage. Like they're making good gambles over and over. It's just that sometimes those gambles go bust. And, if you flip one of those outcomes that whole game, they probably win. And, and this is where I give Soren a ton of credit because like when I was at that game, I'm like, what are they doing here? What are they doing here? What are they doing here? But like, he did. I mean, Soren talked me into this, sort of being a decent play because, it is just about like what kind of gambles you're willing to make. And, that front 4, if Chris Jones doesn't get pressure, they're not getting pressure without help. And so like, that's part of this sort of, the structure of their defense.
Yeah. My point is like, and Jamar Chase is getting the headlines and that's great. Right. But you're talking about a quarterback that's thrown for just short of 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and no interceptions in the last 2 games, 11 and no INTs in the last 3. And again, we don't love passer rating, but we know the scale, a 135 passer rating over the last 4 games, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions over the last 4 games with a 135 passer rating. And part of that's because they didn't get there, but it's also, he is just white hot. And you're going to face good quarterbacks, and I do fear that Aaron Rodgers can be white hot. Tom Brady can be white hot. That's why it's the playoffs. That's why like the favorite is the Packers, and they're 4-1 against. Right? They're not 4,000 to win $100. This isn't Tyson versus Buster Douglas where it's like we see no path where this team can lose. They're still. You play the game, they play the playoffs 5 times. The Packers don't win it 4 of the 5, and they're the favorites. And I think that's it. Is I think in some ways the Chiefs and all great teams, right? And certainly Aaron Rodgers, who carries the burden of having won only 1 championship and only gotten there. I'm not asking anybody to get out a hanky and shed a tear for the Chiefs and the criticism that they get or the expectations that they're held to. But, and by the way, Bonkowski coming through and mentioning for those that aren't catching us on the stream, I'm trash. Jeff is the man.
You're not trash.
The 2 secondary can be had by a good wide receiver quarterback combo. Kudos to him. So I did want to throw that up.
By the way, I think this used to be in my Twitter bio. I don't even remember if it is anymore, but football is fun. Football is meant to be fun. It's supposed to be a fun game to analyze and watch.
And that's why I say, Oh, that's where I come back to Charvarius Ward. No, he's not an elite corner. He's not a one. And I said today, we were talking about what are the takeaways, and we were talking with some of the fans and some of the callers, and they were talking about, well, I think they got to do this. I said, I think the takeaway from that game is more maybe about what you do this offseason. Like, I mean, you'll scheme it. You'll take away and say, okay, maybe we don't bring it all out against Devontae Adams, because they'll put the Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams. We're in the Super Bowl. Not a good idea. We're hosed on that one. Maybe we don't do it. We've seen Herbert to Mike Williams do similar things, right? That's not the first time that the Chiefs corners have been victimized. My point is just this. Charvarius Ward's getting all the hype, and you and I joust about Charvarius Ward, so of course we're going to do it again here. Yeah. I think the bigger issue is that 8 guys went after the quarterback, and Joe Burrow comfortably stepped into a throw, didn't have to throw off his back foot, didn't have to throw around an arm, didn't have to throw while getting hit or sawed in half by a shoulder pad hammering him to the stomach. He was able to comfortably get the ball away. I think, we're burying the lead because the coverage was pretty good. The problem was this extraordinarily expensive defensive line and the rest of their front seven couldn't even, force any kind of early throw from Joe Burrow. He calmly stood his ground, which tribute to him, and dropped a strike in there. This defense is not designed for perfect coverage. This defense is designed, or that defensive play call, let me say, is not designed for perfect coverage. It's designed to mop up a half-ass throw that comes from a quarterback throwing it up for grabs out of desperation. And instead they got a guy who stepped into it and delivered a dime. I think that's the bigger problem, isn't it, Jeff?
Well, I think there's a couple things that I think are problems. One, I don't understand why you're pressing a guy when they have to get 27 yards for a first down. If you look at the all 22 of that, look at how far off Rashad Fenton's playing on the other side of the field.
So, wait, can I answer that? Because remember when they gave a cushion to him and he ran through 10 guys on his way to the end zone?
Well, that's the other point I was going to make. They consistently underestimated how fast this guy was, how much he could do against them. And they did it all game long. And so I think more to the point, it's like, the Blitz have gotten home, certainly. But throughout the course of this game, they played as if they could continually do what they've been doing over and over again. That moment, that 3rd and 27 reminded me a lot of right before halftime in the Super Bowl when Bashaud Breeland's standing up over the top of Mike Evans, and he ends up getting a pass interference call that leads to a touchdown. Why are you playing that situation that close and not putting your hands on the guy on top of it? That's my problem. If you're going to be a big physical guy and stand up over the top of a guy and press somebody, they get your hands on it. And so there are a lot of things that went wrong there that can be remedied. But I do think that, if you look at what could hurt the Chiefs in the playoffs defensively, one is Chris Jones not showing up, and 2 is relying too much on those corners to be more than what they actually are.
The officials that say the Chiefs had their hands on them all day,
all over the
bags were flying. So, I mean, I do think there's an element of an overreaction, maybe, or just a reaction to getting smoked on the play where they had defenders all around Chase and he was gone. And I think, they got a little like, okay, it's 3rd and 27. Let's not get a pass interference penalty and give them a first down. So maybe they stayed, way off. And it blew up in their face. All your points are valid about that. Eric, what were you going to say?
Yeah, let's pause and think broadly, though. I mean, is this a positive for the Chiefs? I mean, if Ward comes to the table and they offer him 4 years, 20
okay,
because teams need players like Charvarius Ward, right? Like veteran players who make modest, like right now, like if you look at the cornerback market. You have Ramsey at 20 a year, Humphrey at 19.5, Lattimore at 19.4, Tre'Davious White. By the way, Humphrey hurt, Tre'Davious White 17.25 hurt. Then you have Darius Slay, Byron Jones hasn't been the same since going to Miami. All that, right? You get down and you're looking at guys like Jalen Mills, Patriots, 4 years, $24 million. If this game is the reason that Charvarius Ward comes back for 4 years, $24 million, was it that bad?
I don't know. I don't think he's worth paying that kind of money. I think you can find somebody in the draft or as you found him to do the same stuff. That's always been my point about Charvarius Ward. Why are we even discussing extending a guy when you can find somebody to do what he does? That's
because I think stability it matters, right? And a guy who, to Petro, like, I think the interesting thing about what Petro said last year was, hey, bringing back most of 22 starters, it maybe isn't the best thing because there aren't guys who are hungry, right? But like, I kind of like there are guys who are part of the team culture that like you don't always want to turn over, right? And having that conversation with Ward and saying, look, man, like, cornerback's a lonely freaking position. And this defense, like, look at what happened to Brashad Breeland, right? Like, he goes to Minnesota, starts 13 games, is complete ass. And like, now he's never going to play. He's on the Cardinals practice squad right now, right? $6 million is life-changing money, buddy. Like, and you can be a stable part of this defense and you can know the defense. You know what I mean? Like, I think that would be, and again, I'm a Chiefs fan, red and gold colored glasses, like all that. So I look at this and I think, okay, what are the positives? But like, to me, like, getting a fair read on your players is a fairly valuable thing too.
Yeah, I listen. I think it's going to come down to what is someone else willing to pay him? They're obviously not going to extend him. There's no point this late for him to not test the market. So he's going to get to the market, and if somebody gives him ridiculous money, you walk. I'm sure that the Chiefs tried to sign him. I think, my feel is that they've always liked him, and that either they didn't have the same opinion of his skills. He and his agent thought they were worth more, or they actually didn't have the money and said, we'd love to, but we can't. So congratulations, you're going to get a shot at free agency. I think there's a proper price to pay him to bring him back. But to Jeff's point, no, he is replaceable.
It's like Steven Nelson, right? Like Steven Nelson got a bunch of money from Pittsburgh and they brought in Charvarius Ward.
I worry that the corner off the scrap heap plan runs dry at some point. Right? Like, you got Charvarius Ward on a 1 year, $1 or $2 million deal and won a championship with him, and then ran it back again on another couple $1 million deal and went back to the Super Bowl. You got Charvarius Ward, a 7th round pick from a team, that actually needed corners. And I don't know why they traded him. The Cowboys at that time did, and they moved him for a guard you were going to cut, right? Like, they've been remarkable. I give great credit to Brett Veach, and if he can do that and if Spagnuolo can just work him in, great. But I think at some point you got to stick your flag in the ground and have some kind of continuity. And a guy that's his age and seems to fit the skill set of what he's looking for, why not keep him and then draft a number one? Right? Like, how about that? How about instead of letting him go and just finding the replacement for him and just treading water, how about keep him and then add to it? Like, to me, if I have two takeaways from what this game maybe said about the Chiefs. One, the pass rush is Chris Jones and Chris Jones alone, because Melvin Ingram had a few pressures, but not enough. Yeah. Frank Clark had a sack where they left him one-on-one with a tight end. And I said this today, if Patrick Mahomes had done what Joe Burrow did on Frank Clark's sack, there'd have been 17 video breakdowns about how Patrick Mahomes should step up in the pocket and why is he escaping a pocket he doesn't have to leave. Right? Like, Joe Burrow pretty much ran into the chest of Frank Clark. Like, it was, I said that was the easiest sack since Brett Favre laid down in front of Michael Strahan to break the sack record. So, and then that's it. He was a no-show. So to me, this idea that, Frank Clark's coming along, no. Like we can talk about the corners succeeding against lesser wideouts. Let's go back and talk about, we've seen backup tackles going against Frank Clark for 3 weeks now. He's really done nothing. And it hasn't been Jonathan Ogden and Tony Baselli that he's been running up against, and he hasn't done anything. So that's the takeaway, number one. And number two, if the idea is not to just hold your defense at a parallel, it's maybe there is still a little something to the Bill Belichick, make sure you got a number one corner somewhere. Like, it would be nice to be able to be like, wow, 147, 2 minutes. This guy's got 147, 2 minutes into the second quarter. Okay, number one corner, you go get Chase. We're turning this faucet off right now. And they don't, even L'Jarius Sneed is not that guy. Wonderfully diverse player, but they don't have that guy. That's why I say, it's not that I say keep Ward and you're all done. I say keep Ward and then go get a number one on top of it.
No. Yeah, well, I think Eric's 30,000 foot view of this. I mean, the question of Charvarius Ward becomes a lot more complicated because it's the money factor, right? We know after the season, you're paying the quarterback a lot more money. You've got to start thinking about what you're going to pay the receiver and Tyreek Hill. You got to start thinking about what you're going to do with Tyrann Mathieu. You got to think about Orlando Brown. All these guys got to get paid, or you got to move on. And so, even a 4-year, $24 million deal for Charvarius Ward can seem a little bit irrational in the world the Chiefs are moving into. And so, I do, if we're getting into the question of was the Chiefs defense exploited or exposed? And I've said this for 8 weeks now, and I've taken a lot of heat for saying this, that if they're going to see teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Denver Broncos in the playoffs, then they're going to be fine. But when you start seeing these kinds of offenses, I did a stat for my column this week. Of the 4 quarterbacks in the playoffs right now who they face, Tannehill, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Justin Herbert. Those guys have thrown 14 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions against them. Mm-hmm. They're 1-4 against those teams. Those are very scary statistics for a defense that we've, lauded for the last 8 weeks. Justifiably so. They've put up some good numbers. They've played at a super high level, but they're not seeing the kind of offenses we saw them see on Sunday. And that part of it scares me.
Scare you, Eric?
It does. I mean, but in the same way that the defense scared me in 2019, right? Like, I don't think and I think this is where Jeff was 100% right. And I think, we all kind of came to this, conclusion together, which is they are not an elite defense, right? They're not a defense. And I, at the beginning of the year, I was wrong. I said this is a defense you can win because of. And I think, at the beginning of the year, you couldn't even win with them. And then, throughout the season, there were games that they won because of the defense. But I think ultimately, it's settling in as a defense you can win with, right? And much like 2019 and even 2020, they could win with that defense. But, if things go wrong for them, then there's going to be an issue in it. As Jeff said, I think that the interesting thing is, right, like in both of the, in 19 and also this year, they caught, the team's, they caught the team's best game the first time around. If they face Buffalo again, if they face Tennessee again, if they face the Chargers again, they'll have the tape and they'll be able to sort of respond. But make no mistake, like they're not walking into a game in the playoffs, any of them thinking we're going to win this game because of our defense.
Yeah. By the way, they fell to 13th in points allowed.
Yeah.
With this that they gave up, and then in yards, they find themselves now at 26. So listen, there's one game to go. They're probably going to hang some pretty good numbers against the Broncos. I'm looking here in the points allowed. Like that is one thing. Obviously, when you fall 8 spots in one game, if they're 11, 12 points better, they could climb all the way back to the top 5. Right? If they shut out a Bronco team that has nothing left to play for, there's a chance that this team finishes top 5 in points allowed. I don't think they're one of the 5 best defenses. I think to Jeff's point, when we kept asking, is this, where do you put this defense? And I think you maybe even did you say, I think they're about 5th? Is that?
Yeah, I said 5. That's top 5 last week.
You were wrong. Okay. You were too high on them.
Yeah,
let the record show.
You wore me down.
Jeff Chadiha was out of his gourd with way too much hype on what was going on with the Chiefs defense. But I do think they might be around 10th or 12th. And that's why I come back to is the bigger issue. Okay, they are what we thought they were. Or at least, somewhere between our highest thoughts of them and our worst thoughts, right? Is the bigger issue that they scored 3 points in the second half. Like,
yes, yes, of course. But that was always the problem, right? Like that was always look. And I hate bringing this back. The reason they lost the Super Bowl is because they couldn't score on offense, right? They gave up a combined 3 catches to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. In the 2019 year, the reason they lost to the reason they lost to Indianapolis was because they scored, what was it, like 12 points that game, 13 points that game. The reason they lost to Tennessee, their last loss of that year, was because Damian Williams fumbled and it got run back for a touchdown by the Titans in that game, right? the reason they lost the Packers is because Matt Moore was the starting quarterback and they couldn't do quite as much as they wanted to. Like that is the whole thing, Soren. Like, and that is it, right? This team and Pat played a wonderful. It's crazy to watch him in person as somebody like I was in the end zone when Wasp happened, and that throw is honestly the greatest like athletic feat I've ever seen, right? Him throwing that ball while getting hit by, it was either Armstead or Buckner, and watching that. The throw he made to McCole Hardman, on that one of the last drives of the half was the prettiest thing I've seen in a long time. The catch by Pringle was great. They were making fabulous plays on offense in the first half of that game. And then starting with the Tyreek Hill drop at the end of the half, to the Kelsey drop on the deep crosser in that game, to the holding penalty, to Pat not picking up the blitz on the field goal drive. They were just out of sync in the second half. And I think one of the reasons was, by the way, we look at the Bengals, and they were very much a big play offense in that game. But in the second half of that game, actually, they did a great job of just controlling the clock. And the high profile plays were very much the deep shots, but the plays that killed the Kansas City Chiefs were the sort of screens to CJ Uzama where they couldn't make tackles, that kind of thing. And the Chiefs got out of sorts because they didn't have the ball a lot in the second half.
Well, but that's to your point about like you rattling off all those things that the offense did wrong, and that's why they lost all those games. That's why they lost those games when you acknowledge the defense isn't good enough to win the game.
Correct. Yeah. But
okay. So I just want to underscore that like, cause I used to want to bash my head into the seat in front of me when I'd sit in the old Arrowhead Theater and listen to Dick Vermeil come out after scoring 44 points and talk about, well, if we hadn't had to punt that one time in the game, and if we had, not settled for, the field goal, the one time after he's just scored, 52 points, like I want to smash my head into a wall. So I just want to underscore that.
But I will say this: the Chiefs' defense got 2 stops to start the game, and they got they held the Bengals to a field goal before the half. They weren't.
By the way, small victory.
As bad as they were, they weren't the opposite of perfect. They didn't require the Chiefs' offense to be perfect on Sunday. That's something
they did in the second half. I disagree. I think to your point about how efficient the Bengals were, I think the defense has to be good enough. And I think I think this has kind of been his point. I think sometimes maybe you and I get so gung-ho being offensive minded, although I like my defense, but I certainly lean to the quarterbacks. I think we get so gung-ho that we do think, I think at times, or at least we can sound like, if you got the quarterback, he'll just overcome it all. And Patrick couldn't overcome it on Sunday because the defense couldn't do enough in the second half, right? Like, yes, I mean, in a perfect world, he scores on all 3 possessions instead of just 1 field goal. But, he was able to get into a rhythm because in the first half, they got stops on the Bengals. And I think what's scary is, and I kept saying this, through 8 wins, there were 21 takeaways, 0 in this game. And I think a large part of their ability to stop people is their ability to take it away. And the Bengals, with a piss-poor offensive line, one that they're going to go to work on in this offseason and make a lot better next year, just like the Chiefs did to theirs, were not able to consistently force the quarterback into bad throws. I mean, he was hot, but he was also, for the most part, pretty comfortable back there. And I know you get pressures, but, good quarterbacks don't piss down their leg because they got pressured. They stand in there, deliver the ball, and they take the hit. And that's what that kid did. And that's why he's special. That's why Mahomes is special. And unless they can knock the other team out of rhythm to get them off their scoring, stretch, or take it away, then the offense does go stale. It sucks sitting over there, all half, right, Jeff? I mean, and
part of the problem is it's a catch-22 because all year long we've talked about them needing to take what defenses are giving them. And so they've certainly got comfortable with that mode of playing offense. But the problem with playing that mode of offense is that sooner or later you're going to have a holding call or a false start or a drop pass. Something's going to derail your drive. You're not always going to go down the field and score 7 points or score 6 and get the extra point. And so there is, and again, I said this a few weeks back and people got upset about it, but without that quick strike element always being available to them, which they've had in years past, they're not a special team. they're a really good team, but they don't instill fear in that way. And so you don't see opposing quarterbacks feeling like, oh, we're down 14 points. How are we ever going to catch this team? Like Joe Burrow never looked like he was in a state of, I got to make something happen here. They just stuck with their game plan. And I think you've seen that from the Josh Allens, the Ryan Tannehills, the Justin Herberts, the Lamar Jacksons. Those kinds of quarterbacks understand that these guys aren't going to run away from us and hide. Flip side of this is that you also don't want to have them slip back into this mode of trying to do too much. This was the first game where I felt like, and it happened late in the game, so you couldn't see it for an entire 60 minutes. This was the first game they felt pressure from an opposing team's offense. This was the first game they felt like, we got to make something happen here. And they knew when they kicked that field goal to tie the game up, they were in no man's land. And that's why it got kind of funky at the end, because they knew we might not get the ball back from these guys because they can go down and score, and they can score in a lot of different ways. And that to me is interesting as this Chiefs team evolves.
Well, and that was part of the point that Petro and I were talking about, the end of game stuff, where it's just like this team doesn't permute through a lot of the different games, right? Like this isn't a Minnesota Vikings team that loses every game or wins every game by a field goal or more. Like half the Chiefs games are decided by a touchdown or more. And like Andy Reid in the offense and like everybody doesn't get to sort of think about these things. You're right, Jeff. In the win streak, when did they have to come from behind? It was the Chargers game. But they really didn't. They weren't threatened by another team's. Like this was the first time they got a big lead, and like the other team threatened them even in a games in their win streak. The only other game where was contested really was the comeback win against the Chargers, but that was another one. The Chargers controlled that game, and the Chiefs hawked them down from behind for the most part. And so I think somebody, I think it was Travis, who said that I think the loss is okay, and like. I kind of agree with that, and I know I'm a homer to a certain extent, but I think I think, and I said this to Petro, and I was wrong in 18, but like when they lost to the Rams and the New England and those teams, I was like, I think this team's going to win the Super Bowl because they're learning lessons here. Like, I do think the Sunday is a lesson. Like, does that mean they're going to win the Super Bowl? Chances are no, but I think it does. I really wish they would have kept the 1 seed, but be that as it may, I think that this game was important for like a learning experience for the team as far as you're not invincible. You haven't figured it out.
I think for them to win the Super Bowl, they're going to have to take the football away. Right now, maybe they can win one in an epic 37-34 shootout where the nobody turns the ball over, or it's 1-1. But if the Chiefs, I do think, to Jeff's point, I don't think they're going to take down in order. What would it be? Herbert, Allen. I can see Tannehill, but it could be, who else would it be instead of that? Slotted in there, or maybe it's Burrow again. Burrow, and then Aaron Rodgers. Let's go back. Deshaun Watson they took down en route to winning the Super Bowl. They got Deshaun Watson. And then it was Ryan Tannehill and it was Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, and this comes back, to kind of the bet that Jeff and I have about quarterbacks versus defense. I was really loving mine when it looked like the Chiefs defense was becoming pretty small. Not as bold on it. But Justin Herbert, if he gets his ass in there, I'll feel pretty good. I wish I'd grabbed Joe Burrow along the way as well. But I do still think I don't know that they can take down 5 elite quarterbacks, right? I don't think this defense is good enough to do that. They're going to need a little help. They're going to need the Titans, frankly. I don't think they want to play in Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game. I mean, if we're to talk about how the playoffs are shaping up right now, because like I said, I don't think you want to see 3 elite quarterbacks, because I think one of them's going to get them. I think Jeff's right. I mean, I don't believe that the pass rush, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Spagnuolo can have a day and dial up the blitz the right times, or there's some tip balls, right? But I do worry that if they've got to take down 4 elite quarterbacks, that's too big a hill for this defense to climb. They're going to need a Tannehill or a Carr, or God forbid a Roethlisberger back ass in there, which I know is almost impossible. That would help.
Yeah, but all those quarterbacks, even the elite ones, are capable of nonsense, right? Like Burrow was leading the.
But they're not going to go 0-4, Eric. I mean, do you agree?
Sure, but you're saying like.
And to Jeff's point, they're 1-4 against those guys.
Yeah,
basically.
but like they need to take the ball away. Agree with that 100%. But like, if you look at like, and I have to see if this is still true. Who leads the league right now in interceptions thrown?
Is it Baker?
I'm sorry, Burrow. Burrow had not thrown. Burrow's now tied for 5th most with Justin Herbert. Right. Josh Allen is 3rd in the NFL in interceptions thrown. So like we're catching like sort of the bad end of variance with a lot of those guys, right? Like Josh Allen was in fuego against the Chiefs in week 5 or whatever that was, right? Ryan Tannehill played his best game. Ryan Tannehill this season has, I'm trying to look at as many interceptions as touchdowns. It feels like, 17 touchdowns, 14 picks. He's tied. So like the AFC playoff quarterbacks that the Chiefs are going to face, Allen, 15 interceptions this year, tied or 2nd most in the NFL, tied with Matthew Stafford and Taylor Heineke. Then Herbert has 14. Tannehill has 14.
That's all great.
Burrow has 14.
But how many?
They can take the ball away from those guys.
How many came against the Chiefs? Dick.
Wait, I'm the only one allowed to swear on here.
Yeah.
Come on.
Richard.
Is that swearing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I can get by with that. Listen, I hear you. And I do think that there's probably a game where the DBs of the Chiefs will have a day that Spagnuolo will get one of those guys. But we're not talking about getting a win.
We are totally rooting for the Raiders Sunday night. I agree with what you're saying. That's what I get that. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, none of these guys are insurmountable. The guy is Pat, right? The guy is Pat. You know, whenever every other, you know, when Buffalo's got the Blue, Red, and Dead podcast, and they're talking about, you know, their chances. They're talking about Pat the way that we're talking about Josh Allen, and they're more right than we are right now.
I hear you. And listen, I'm not saying I think you could count on winning 2 boat races, right? Like, you know, like, or not count on it, not hang your hat on it. But if we're like, okay, the Chiefs are going to have, because let's be honest, they're going to have to win 4 games. They're going to have to win. They're not getting the 1 seed in all likelihood, you know, so they're going to have to win 4 games. And I do think that, to Jeff's point, I think this has been, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jeff, so tell me if I'm shaping this the right way. But your point has always been, you know, you're going to have a game where the defense comes up big.
Yeah.
And you know, I think they probably will have to win some mutt, you know, 23-20. You know, I don't think it's going to be 17-16, although, you know, if it's bad weather in KC or, you know, where else could it be bad weather or not? Buffalo, you know, something like that. Which I guess that's not going to happen. Bad weather in KC in all likelihood. Then I think, you know, there might have to be a day that the defense plays, and I think this puts some doubt back into whether or not the defense can win that day.
Yeah, and I feel like what's often overlooked in those games we're talking about, and I appreciate who was it? Travis talked about the Chiefs not getting beaten twice by those teams. What should be disconcerting in those games is that Patrick didn't play well. A lot of those games, that he had moments in those games where he really struggled, and even in this game, not being able to deliver more than 3 points in the second half. You look at the way he played in that first Chargers game where he had obviously game-ending interception. The second Chargers game, pass on the 1 yard line, puts it in the dirt. Another pass gets intercepted almost gets returned for a touchdown by a defensive end. He's had moments in these games where it wasn't just, we didn't have Chris Jones, we didn't have Willie Gay, we didn't have these guys playing on defense. It's like the offense got taken to task. And so a lot of these teams they are going to see have been built to deal with the Chiefs in the postseason. And so I do think it's a little bit of bravado to think, well, it's just they won't beat us twice because we're the Chiefs. I think there are legitimate challenges these teams bring to the table that should be scary.
But I do agree that Patrick Mahomes plus the weaponry makes it really that's the team you don't want to have to beat twice along the way. I think there is something to what Travis said there. I hear what you're saying too. Like, are we concerned the drops did continue? Right? Like Tyreek Hill had massive ones. I mean, I think the positive is there's a lot of misplays. Tyreek Hill misses one in the end zone. He misses the big play before the half. They get a holding penalty after the returner's already passed the guy who holds on a kick return for the touchdown. They had a day where the official said, screw you, we're not letting you all the wideouts, and called a lot of them where, let's be honest, there's been a lot of games where they've done that or less or that or more and not gotten the calls. But on this day, it went against them. Right?
So do we think the officials were a big problem here? Is that what
I
you're saying?
think NFL officials blow. I don't think they're very good at all. So, I lost my mind when everyone was complaining about the scab officials when the strike was going on. And then immediately, like the first week back, we had that asinine, what was it, Seahawks, Packers, debacle. Like they can't, they take instant replay. You might as well go, let's spin the big wheel and have a big wheel of outcomes. Oh, it stands, it's overturned. We're going to call a new penalty and just spin the wheel, because that's literally what it's like when you go to replay on a lot of these things. So I have no problem with the refs. I never leave it on the refs. I've yet to see a call that I'm like, the fix is in, despite what I have so many callers. They just got it in. I see calls where I'm like, you're fat, you're old, you're not in position, you can't see, you clearly didn't come to the officials' meetings. But I don't ever see anything like I don't think it was a personal foul penalty on the sideline. But after he's already in the process of coming down, he does go ahead and grab back at the pads. So technically, he's grabbing the horse collar area. I think it's a bad penalty. I don't think it's in the spirit of the rules. But you could make a case for it. So, like, pissing and moaning, and to Andy Reid's credit, he doesn't do it, although he made his point, I don't want to get fined. Well, if you think the calls are bad, then take the fine and stand up for your team. That's one thing. If they're really bad, then send a message, I'm not taking this crap. Okay? And so I get tired of the I don't want to get fined thing. Then it's not a big deal. Then don't even say that. Say the officials do a great job and move on. For me, there's so many things the Chiefs, wet down their leg on to try to fix themselves that I don't even like bringing up the officials. But what do you think, Jeff?
Well, I actually went back. I was watching the game in Dallas, so I didn't have the sound up, so I wasn't hearing the commentary. I went back and watched it again. I mean, I think I was more confused, and I get that. Look, when your team loses, it's always easy to say, oh, the refs did this call, that call. The calls at the end were legitimate calls. I mean, Charvarius Ward tackled Chase in the end zone on the play that ended up being the fourth down play where they had offsetting penalties. L'Jarius Sneed grabbed Tyler Boyd's face mask. Like, I look at more at calls that affect the outcome of the game than, oh, this 3rd and 3, this pass interference, I shouldn't have called that. I mean, the way the game was going, the way they were calling it, if you were getting close and putting your hands on somebody, on a receiver, they were throwing a flag. And so I didn't see, I was looking for more stuff that I might have missed that I thought was super egregious. But I agree with you. I think some of the calls that I thought were borderline didn't affect the outcome of the game in the way I thought they would. Even that false start people were complaining about, yeah, okay, well, it's moving back 5 yards. The Bengals were going to score there. I think the bigger issue was how that game was managed at the end on both sides of it. But I'm with you. I think officiating, even the most egregious stuff I've seen, going back to the Saints pass interference, non-pass interference call against the Rams in the NFC title game a few years ago, Saints still had plenty of opportunities to win that game. The Chiefs could have won this game a lot of different ways without worrying about what the refs were doing.
It sucks. I don't expect anyone to enjoy it, but it is part of the game. And it's why Eric and I talked about this, Jeff. If you're going to play out the end, like I've long defended and will continue to defend Andy Reid's clock management. I think it's been much better than it was ever painted, where he was, painted as like Bozo the Clown with these, floppy red shoes and a squirting flower and getting out of a tiny car, like that's not it at all. But I am starting to think he doesn't get it so good when he doesn't have the ball, because which is amazing.
The ball or the balls?
No, the ball when he's on defense is what I was getting at, because which is amazing, because he's his own play caller, which is usually where I think you find a lot of guys get in trouble because they're trying to manage too many things. And I think his reaction, which I know we discussed, we're going to talk about here, because I'm curious on both you guys, his reaction speaks to how lost they were, because he's still lost in trying to answer the question. And today, given 2 days to try to work up an answer, he just punted. I'm going to say to you what I said to the team. We're moving on. Well, we're not going to play the Broncos, so we don't need to move on. Yeah. You can talk to us about what it is. You're just refusing to answer. And let's be honest, you're Andy Reid, Super Bowl champion, 5th most wins in the history of the league. I mean, screw us. You can get away with it. Now, if you're Nick Sirianni, hey, a-hole, we're going to answer some questions. Billy's going to pound him, and he better stand there and answer them all because the fan base is going to be up his yang if he doesn't. Here in Kansas City, if we keep pressing him on it, the culture in Kansas City is going to be like, get over it. Chiefs are still the 2 seed. They're still going to win. Like, let's be honest. Our fan base, the people we serve, those of us that cover just the Chiefs, Jeff's in Kansas City, but he serves the national perspective of the league. There's only so far I can go with something on that, and it's difficult in this Zoom time. But for my fans, that are the Chiefs fans, my listeners, my audience, is like, I'm done with you. I don't want to hear this anymore, right? You've asked it. He's not answering it. He gave us a Super Bowl. Shut up. But and I get it. So I have to move on, although Spagnuolo's going to answer it tomorrow. When did you talk about letting them score? We're going to get a crack at a new guy. So guess what? Steve Spagnuolo, we're going to hear what he says. And I think he's going to be that. I think what he will say is, well, that's really one for Andy to answer. Well, I don't care. I know Andy makes the final call, but I want to know when you were thinking about it. And we'll see what he says. But you have to let him score, right? I know he almost got away with it. He almost got an opportunity to give his quarterback 40 some odd seconds and a chance to go down. But literally everything was working perfect for him until everything that had happened for 58 minutes before then happened again. That was his guys getting penalties, which was not factored in to his thinking at all. So, Jeff, I'm curious, did he botch the end of the game?
I won't go so far as say he botched it. I think he got caught in a place that he didn't expect to be. And I think I heard it was Anthony Hitchens make a comment about this today about how chaotic we thought it was. And he's like, well, when you're down there, it's not that chaotic. You're actually out there just trying to get from play to play. My read of what was happening, and I take it by segments. I think the first down, the second down play when Burrow was sneaking it after they got whatever, their first down, Mason got the first down. It looked to me like they were trying to not score.
Right.
They were trying to get the Chiefs to burn timeouts. So that's the first question. What did the Chiefs think they were doing? And I think that might have thrown them off initially. Okay, what are we going to do here? They get the third down, and now I'm suspecting if you think your defense has been that good for the last 8 weeks, and they've had some fourth down stops in here, let's not forget against the Chargers, a few of those, you're probably thinking, well, let's get a stop. Let's trust them to get a stop. Now, the play with Mixon is the one I don't know if they were actually trying to run it in or not. And that should have been the play where you're saying, if they run the ball, let them score. Once they got to fourth down, it was all bets off. We're ending the game here. And I think that's what made him frustrated, was because he thought maybe all the calls that were happening against them came to a head and they got a bad deal, a raw deal. They stopped mixing, thought they were getting off the field, and it didn't happen. And then from that point on, it just, Tyler Boyd got the penalty next, and it was all over. But I feel what I'm saying, it started with the Bengals doing some funky stuff that I'm not certain they really believed in it, but they were just trying to find a way to get the Chiefs to burn those timeouts. I think the best case scenario for the Bengals was no timeouts for the Chiefs, as little time as possible for Mahomes, and at the very least a field goal. And so they went a roundabout way of getting that, and Andy Reid just took a ride in the process on this roller coaster.
I think, Jeff, you said it perfectly. Andy Reid was along for the ride while Zach Taylor, and I can't believe I'm saying this, played him like a fiddle, right? That was a very well-crafted and lucky. You're right. I mean, it's lucky that Chase goes out of bounds the 11 and not the 10, right? It's lucky that, Joe Mixon falls down at the 1 and not the 1.5, and they don't have to face that fourth down. All those things, it's lucky that the referees were never going to give the Chiefs any leeway. And to your point, Jeff, they didn't take any, right? They certainly, those were holds. The pass interference on the corner route to Boyd was not pass interference. There were plenty of plays that were touchy. Those two weren't. And we talked about this on Soren's show. To not think that those things through ahead of time is just one of the things that I think the Chiefs got caught off guard with. And that's where I think, the old guard of football, I think where Andy is. Andy's picking up dollar bills off the ground by being just so much better than people, scheming and all that kind of stuff, right? Having the best quarterback in football. and the Cincinnati Bengals found $50 bills on the floor against the Chiefs and picked them up, and the Chiefs didn't even know they were on the ground. Like, I think, and it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that Andy Reid's a Hall of Fame coach who's better than Zach Taylor in every way except for that one way, and that's what happened Sunday.
I think. Go ahead, Jeff.
I would say you can answer this. If you remember the Super Bowl when Malcolm Butler intercepted Russell Wilson on the sideline, in the end zone, people forget how that sequence played out. There's a lot of Pete Carroll looking over at Bill Belichick and going back and forth, and who's coming in and who's coming out, big personnel, small personnel. That kind of stuff happens at the end of games, and it's a chess match. And so, I do think going back, I'm saying the same thing over again. I see Jeff Jones mention the 3rd and 27s where they got in trouble in the first place. But I think Andy was along for the ride and couldn't figure out fast what was happening to him.
And I think it's a good time to point out there's 7 defensive coaches on the defensive side. There's 5 or 6 coaches on Andy's side on the offensive side. Andy's switching back and forth. And there's probably a here we're all in switch. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't know what it is. It's been a long time since I asked a coach, how does the headset work? But back in the day, you used to have the offensive side and the defensive side, and they didn't cross over. There's a lot of voices. Everybody, got an idea till Andy shuts them all off and says, no, just this. And, there is a pecking order of how it all works, but there is a lot of crap going on. I never want to fail to mention that. I understand, when we're sitting there watching it, we're not also trying to come up with the next play and the next call. But I do think that is a weakness of Andy Reid's, because he's his own offensive play caller, but on the defensive side, he's got to be the clock manager, right? Steve Spagnuolo's got to have his head in the play sheet. This one's on Andy. He's got to manage that clock, right? And Spagnuolo's got to come up with it, and he's got to be like, Steve, all out. I'm not giving up a field goal. Or he's got to be like, just give him the field goal, get me the time, and Spagnuolo goes to the next, play call. That's got to work. And I think the reason he's been so evasive is they were kind of a mess. And I think the Bengals, and I think he knows it. I don't think it worked the way he's used to it. I think usually it's a machine, because a lot of times you'll even see Andy bark over at somebody like, no, I got this. He's in control at that point. Somebody's trying to pipe something in, but he's got his vision of where he wants to go. It's when they have the ball, right, and where he wants to go, and he's clear of what he wants to do. And on this one, I think there's a little bit of like, what do you got, Steve? Like, what do you – and then the Bengals start like, well, I think he was like, oh, buyer's remorse. We should have just let him score. And then the Bengals don't get it. He's like, oh, crap, this might actually work. And so it's kind of like that, the poker hand that you had no business being in. And then you're like, wait a minute, I think I'm going to win this thing. And then the river, it kills you, and the guy sucks out on you. You're like, oh, this sucks. Really, I made a bad play to even be in the hand. But damn, I was gonna get paid. And then the river screwed me. That's what it sounds like to me. And I think the biggest key is learn from it. Yeah. And if his answer is to his team and his coaching staff, we're not talking about this anymore, he's not learning from it. And that's dangerous. That's a big picture danger of not evolving with the draft, not evolving with free agency, not evolving with game management. The game is always moving. There was a time where the smart coach is like, the forward pass, that's asinine. It's too risky. It doesn't happen in big chunks, but it's little things like that along the way that finally age you out of the game. And so he can say whatever he wants to us, but they better have spent some time figuring that crap out.
Well, Eric, you were there, and I couldn't see this from the TV. I was curious what was happening in these timeouts. You're taking timeouts, and Joe Burrow's just kind of walking around in the middle of the field. It's like, were the Chiefs over there talking about what they were going to do? Because every time they flashed the sideline, everybody was watching like they were watching a movie.
Well, that was the thing with the
talking about what are we going to do here?
That was the thing with the 4th down, where we were looking and we're like, they're not giving any indication the kicker's coming out, right? Like, and then there was the offsetting penalties, and it was like, there's no indication the kicker's coming out. And I do think that that's one of the places where the Bengals may have erred, which is not kicking a field goal. But ultimately, like, the whole time I was nervous, I was just like, the moment they throw a fade to Jamar Chase, it's either a touchdown or a game-ending penalty. Like, because a penalty ends that game, which I think is the other reason why I don't think the Chiefs really had their head on straight, was as they're using their timeouts, right? The once you get done with timeouts, basically the game's over with like a hold or basically a penalty they've been calling on you all game. And that's what I didn't understand about their approach. And like, it was a very like, and I have to say, I did text somebody on that. I was like, call a timeout now. Like I was, sort of trying to set the thing up. And of course, no one listens to me, but like, I was like, I was telling him to call timeouts after the completion to Chase, because I thought that, that was a position where if they called their timeouts early and they weren't successful in defense, then they just let them score because they realized they don't have the timeouts left. They kind of played it halfway and like gave themselves, as you guys said, a glimmer of hope. And it was really weird, man. And I hope they learn from it, as you said, Soren. Like I can see not wanting to talk to you guys about it, but if they're doing that in lieu of talking to themselves about it,
right,
then I think that's a dangerous place.
I do too. And let me say this. I think part of the reason it was so weird is because, listen, Zach Taylor won, he gets the credit. The win goes next to him. The loss goes next to Andy's name. And so I don't want to take anything away from that. But I think the Bengals were kind of a hot mess too. I mean, I think, what's that?
It was Forrest Gump-like.
Yeah, I mean, I think
stumbled into it.
It's kind of like you play poker, not to make it yet another poker analogy, but our buddy Sam McDowell from the Star will love it. When you play the guy who doesn't know what the hell he's doing, it's kind of a tough go, right? When a boxer gets in there and some guy comes out fighting him like a tough man competition, flailing away, like you're like, whoa. I mean, like, no, this is a trained, I square up, you square, like I know to look, I got to duck and weave, and you come out here like a windmill. And like the guy who never folds, you're like, well, does he have something? Like you eventually get a read on him. And I do think that the Bengals were kind of a hot mess too, which made it tough to counterpunch. Like, well, what the hell are you doing here? And so, listen, I think it's the evolution of the game, and we'll see. The Chiefs need to learn from it because I think their clock management is going to need to be good. And I think to Travis's point earlier, Patrick Mahomes, I think at the end of the day, yes, it almost worked, but it didn't work. And so the takeaway is Patrick Mahomes cannot end a game watching 6 minutes. It can't happen. Whatever you have to do to get him out on the field, you have to do it. I think that's the end takeaway. At the end of the day, you should not be rewarded or be like, we played it right, we just got a little unlucky because of a call. I do want to ask the question about the offensive line, because that's how it ended last year. And we'll finish with this. Joe Thuney played great. There's been a lot of people that want to now move on from Orlando Brown or franchise him and trade him and play Joe Thuney at left tackle. That's not going to happen. They're going to put a tag on Orlando Brown. But are we reaching a point when, Andrew Wiley is down and Orlando Brown practiced? We'll hear how he did. We'll see if he's a full go the day 2. That's where we're really going to know something. If he practices again on Wednesday. And was he a full practice? I didn't look at. I'm sorry. I probably should have. There's probably a practice report out there. I didn't look at what his official designation was. But Andy Reid said he practiced. Was a full go, is how Andy put it in the press conference today. Should alarm bells be going off about the offensive line right now?
I think there should be not like full scale, like what is it, 8 alarm, 12 alarm fire.
Yeah,
but I suspect some of their offensive issues in the second half of that game had to do with their offensive line injury problems, that they couldn't call some plays they wanted to run. And Joe Thuney did a really good job, and they did hold up, and Alec Grady played well, but I think they had to run some different plays than they would have liked to have run them. They still have a pretty good pass rush in Cincinnati. Trey Henderson was pretty much able to be nullified, and I think part of that was because the ball was coming out faster and they were calling more runs. But I think going forward, you don't want to be in a situation where you're running out of tackles. And you do hope that Orlando Brown's going to be okay, but it is weird that he hurt himself in a pregame warmup. Like, I just don't know. Watching pregame warmups, I don't know how hard offensive tackles are working at that point before a game. It'd be different if it was like a what's that?
Do you think it's a cover-up?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he tweaked it earlier in the week and it acted up the day of, but yeah, I don't think this offense wants to see what it's like. As much as they've got different bodies there, I do think it's a stretch to say that Joe Thuney playing left tackle for a full game could be the same as what he was in an emergency role against the Bengals. I don't think you want to try that experiment and see how it goes for you. So, yeah, I think it's a concern for me.
Where's your concern, Eric?
Yeah, it's there. I mean, but the thing is, Orlando Brown's probably going to come back and be fine. Obviously, losing Lucas Niang is not good for this year or future, right? A patella tendon is not. I mean, that's a bad knee injury. But the replacement guys, Andrew Wiley and Nick Allegretti, were starters in the Super Bowl for them. That's kind of the.
That's not a badge of honor.
It isn't, but it isn't. But there's the part about there's Nick Allegretti started like 15 games for the Chiefs last year, and he wasn't a problem until they got down to lineman number 5, right? Like basically, and Andrew Wiley obviously is not, but like they got Kyle Long, like as you said, Kyle Long on the team as well. I think that they'll end up being fine. Tooney as well. They never had a player of Tooney, Trey Smith, or Creed Humphrey's caliber on the line last year, right? So to me, the issue with the line in the Super Bowl was basically like not having one good player basically on the whole line. And now they at least have 3, and I think they can patch it up as long as there's not another injury. So I'm concerned certainly. And when Lucas Niang came out there at left tackle to start the game, I was a little nervous. But I think it'll be okay unless they have more bad luck there.
Yeah, I'm right now they're okay. And they're talking about Mike Remmers maybe coming back, but he's got a back injury, and we know what that does for big guys. That's the thing, is these are injuries that scare you. Like you said, Lucas Niang, I worry about his career, big picture wise. And I do think that a calf on Orlando Brown is a little bit scary with as big as he is. And I never like the idea of a back, right, with Mike Remmers. I know Mitchell Schwartz was teasing people on Twitter that, yeah, he could be ready. He wanted them to buy his house for $500,000 more than it was worth, and was given a whole list of things. But I mean, if Orlando Brown plays, they're in good shape, right? I think, but that you can overcome one tackle. I don't think you want to be overcoming 2. They're in better shape this time around. They do have to throw Tooney out there, but it's frightening. This scares me. How about Kyle Long? Hound Dog's asking about that. I'm of the opinion, I'm curious what you guys think. If there was anything there, we'd have seen Kyle Long already. Like, he's been measured and found to be left wanting, is my opinion right now. I don't think you'd have seen Allegretti out there. I don't think you would have seen Andrew Wiley. I think they were less than impressed with what they saw, or one of those two wouldn't be around. Is that fair to say?
Wasn't he involved in some kind of roster move a few weeks back when they were activating somebody, or they signed somebody? Was Ingram came on board, or was it? I thought there was some question about whether he was going to have to go on IR or some different list.
Check.
Maybe I can't remember, but I thought he was caught in the mix of like he may have to be.
Well, but if he went on IR, it was the 3-game IR, right? He's still with the team. No, because he was listed as inactive last week.
It was okay
from doing the pregame. Let me look here.
He just hadn't suited up.
No, he hasn't suited up. Yeah, there he is on that depth chart. I'm going to check one other thing, but I know Curtis, who does all our injury stuff, listed off Kyle Long as the
okay. That thing Hound Dog says when he had to come off IR. That's what I'm thinking of.
But is there any reason to believe there's anything there? Anyone want to think that there's?
No, if he was good enough to play, he'd be playing now, right? Yeah. Or he'd be active over guys like Nick Allegretti and even Lucas Niang and Remmers and guys like that guys like that who have less pedigree than he has for sure. So I think the Tooney thing is a great backup plan to have. I would not make it the go-to plan for much more than the rest of the season. Let's just say.
Yeah, no, I think you can win a game with him at left tackle. It's not the plan at left tackle. That's how I would describe it. Kyle Long is on the active roster. I just double-checked that. And they did make the move. Colin Saunders and Chris Lamons, both eligible to come off, and I think did get activated today, if I'm not mistaken, as they came off. So a little more depth at corner along the defensive line. All right. Anyone got the Broncos winning this game, or is it a walkover? Make this quick.
I think the better question is, Vic Fangio have a job come Monday. I don't see the Broncos being anywhere close to this game. So probably 20-point blowout.
Yeah, dead men walking.
Quick work.
I'm with you. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is
on the PFF forecast, you weren't quite ready to pull the trigger on it, right? You wanted it, or am I mixing up games? I listened to it on my old man walk today.
I can't remember what, like, whether I wanted to lay the points or not. Like, I do think like the only bet to make is Chiefs -9.5, -10. And I do also think that there is a better chance that we're all giving to the Houston Texans beating the Tennessee Titans. And so I do think the 1 seed's still in the purview. And I do think, I talked to you about this on the show. The 2 seed matters a lot. Like, to be able to play a playoff game in the divisional round at home, no questions asked, except for winning the first game, that matters a lot too. So I think the Chiefs play hard, and I think they come out with a bang here.
Yeah, I do too. I think they win. I don't think the 1 seed is in play. I think the Titans are going to rip the Texans.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I don't see it. I mean, I know they beat them once. The Titans also lost to the Jets. I mean, they're kind of a weird team. I don't think you're not going to see Derrick Henry. He's going to practice this week, but he's not going to play. They're going to save him for the playoffs. But I'd love to dream a dream. That dream ain't the one that I'm going to go to bed with tonight. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network and NFL.com, check out his great work both there at NFL Network and, of course, on the website, NFL.com. You can see Eric Eager's work at PFF.com and on the PFF YouTube channel. You can catch my work at 810WHP.com if you're not here in Kansas City where you can listen to it live. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Remember, we do go live with the taping of the podcast. If you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live at 9 o'clock every Tuesday night. Look for us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. We appreciate all the kind comments we've had. Please keep the likes coming. Send out the invites to your friends. Get them all listening. We appreciate it very much. And, of course, we'll do our 2D podcast, NFL Breakdown, coming up on Thursday. We stream that live Thursdays at 9. So for Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.